Welcome back to the Spewak Training Podcast, and today we are jumping into episode 2 of the Steady State Running podcast segment for us with Danny Stults. Danny is a coach on the Spewak Training staff, and we've obviously had a relationship for several years now, and as you've heard in the previous episode, we're really trying to take our podcast to another level. We're still going to be interviewing athletes on our staff and sharing all the coaches and the success that we've had, but we're also going to be doing something along the lines of interviewing different runners in the industry, sharing a little bit more about the wealth of knowledge that our coaching staff has in terms of, tips and tricks on how to train in the heat, and how to qualify for Boston, all these different things. And so we're really pumped up about it. And I'm going to be on this episode again today, kind of with the training wheels with Coach Stults, who's already doing an amazing job with the episode, but we're going to do kind of a nice little slow handoff to him as he will, in the coming months, he's going to be kicking this off. So Danny, I'm excited about this chat and to jump into episode 2 with you.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for being here. Thanks for kind of oiling my squeaky training wheel as we get going. So I'm definitely excited to continue working together.
Well, he's already a natural at it, which is fun to see. No surprise. We just had to give him a mic, all these years of coaching experience. But one of the really special parts of our relationship is that, and we talked about this in the previous episode, Danny was coaching me in the year 2012 to about 2013. Yeah. And we were racing 5Ks and local races around town. And what was fun about our relationship was that you were coaching me, but we were also able to train together. I mean, and I wasn't doing workouts with Danny, but we were, at least able to do easy runs together and long runs together. And so a lot of the things that I was doing was kind of based on what Danny was doing, just from the fact that it's fun to go to races together. It's fun to do events together, especially when your coach is there. And one of the things I remember distinctly was Danny always talked about, like, hey, he was a mid-distance runner to heart. Like, he was not a marathoner. He was like, I'm a mid-D guy. 5Ks is hard, as far as I'll go. And you were very adamant about that. And as you guys may remember, in 2013 at the Boston Marathon, the events that happened that day, they were obviously very tragic. And they deeply affected the city of Boston, the United States as a whole. And I just remember Danny was so outraged about, what had happened and deeply affected. And that I'll never forget, you on that specific day said, I am going to train for a marathon and I'm going to qualify and I will be at the Boston Marathon 2014, and the rest was history. So I wanted to kind of start there because I think Boston is such a big deal to running, to runners and to qualifying. But I do think it's worth kind of sharing your story about how you initially got there. And then we can talk a little bit about, okay, what does that process look like to actually qualify for Boston?
Yeah. Well, the irony about being a mid-D runner in my own mind is that we were running a lot of volume. Like we were training like longer distance athletes. But what was so unique about the events that took place in Boston in 2013, I remember I was in high school when 9/11 happened. I remember watching that on TV. But what was unique about the Boston incident was that I was in the Big River Race Management office and I was able to essentially watch the events live on Twitter. And it was this inflow of live, unfiltered information that was very powerful and deeply meaningful to me, just because of how just the humanity of it, just the inhumanity of it, I suppose. But it was an attack on one of our major events, but it was an attack on something that otherwise is such a beautiful and joyous thing, where the finish line is a place of safety and freedom, and whether you're winning the race or crossing it in dead last, it's still a place of celebration, and that was taken away. So it resonated with me as a runner in that sense. And like you said, that day, I remember sitting in the office with like a pit in my stomach, and I just decided I was going to run next year. And I put it out there, and I was fortunate that I had a few friends who did the same thing or agreed to do it with me and agreed to try to do it with me, because we didn't know. We never ran marathons. So I committed to doing it, and then ironically committed to qualifying for Boston, or running Boston, which means you got to qualify, right? And we had a full year to qualify, but I was so naive in my sense of how to qualify. I was kind of hamstrung in my opportunities to qualify. So I signed up for the Heart of America Marathon, which is where's Mizzou, Mark? What's it?
Columbia, which is
Columbia.
arguably the hardest course and race in the country.
Yeah, it's in Columbia, Missouri, the Heart of America Marathon. It's on Labor Day. The race started at like 5 in the morning. But I remember I signed up 2 weeks prior. Said, okay, I'll go do this. I need to run. I don't know what I needed to run, 3 hours back then or something.
Yeah.
But I'll just run long run pace for 2 hours, and then I'll just jog it in if I can't make it. But I should be okay. I should be okay to qualify. I didn't know much about the course. I didn't know much about the terrain. It was ranked the 7th or 8th most difficult marathon in the country that year because of humidity and terrain. It's massively hilly the second half, but the humidity eats people alive. So you see these massive, like, positive splits. But anyway, I went out. I got through 20-something miles under 6-minute pace, which was surprising to me, shocking to me at the time. My crew at the time was yelling at me to slow down like I was crazy. I had a support crew there, and I just told them, like, don't. They yelled at me like, "Hey, slow down! You're going too hard." When I was with a group of guys, so it was like, "Oh, let's point out the weakest link." So, but I remember telling them, like, "Hey, just chill." And anyway, long story short, we hit the hills. There's me and one other young man who he was an NAIA athlete, and he had run the marathon before, and we had talked a little bit, and I saw this massive hill somewhere in Columbia, and I patted him on the butt, and I said, "Hey, if I see you at the finish line, great." But I said, "If I see you before the finish line, great. If not, I'll see you there." And he goes on to win the race. I got second, qualified. But that's my Boston qualifying story.
Yeah, it's incredible how it happened. And, I think the coolest part about the story is that you set out the goal based on something that was beyond running. It was the inspiration about being at that event, which is different for a lot of people because I think, not that those events aren't forgotten because you remember them every single year and
Right.
It's still cherished and part of the history and tradition of the Boston Marathon. But now there's a lot of people that are getting into the Boston Marathon, similar to the what for the years prior to that just want to be there to accomplish that goal. And your motivation, inspiration was so different. But in a lot of ways, it was the same in the sense that you had a goal to get there. It meant that much for you to run in that starting line, regardless of what had happened the year before. You really wanted to be at the Boston Marathon. We have a lot of clients who are calling us that are basically like, I have to get to Boston, and it's this desire and want. So, you've experienced now. Now I'd love to kind of hear your thought process on qualifying for kind of the normal person.
Yeah, well, before I step into that, you nailed it, Mark, and I didn't say it as well as I should have, but it was about something bigger than ourselves, right? It was about this collective running sense, this collective humanity sense, this just we can't bow to fear, essentially, and that was my motivation to qualify. And then when I got there and actually ran the race in 2014. I have never felt more connected to people in the race, people on the sidelines, people at the finish line, people in the city. And I've run a lot of really quality events. I could speak highly of, 25 events where I've been treated really, really well. But just a tangent story, my bib number at Boston was 672. Which means I was on the list of qualifiers. I was 672nd because I ran 2:42 at Columbia to qualify. So I was wave one, which is great, but it was hot that day. And I remember I was a little bit hurt. So I ran in Brooks Ravennas, which I don't know if you remember those, but those were not racing shoes. They're quite heavy. And my last 3 miles, I really, really struggled. But again, my bib number 672 and some intoxicated Bostonian, like a mile from the finish line. I'll never forget. He yelled out, "Hey, 672." And he said some motivational profanity to me. And it was awesome. It like uplifted me, it like rebounded, but it was like that all day. And it was like that everywhere after the race. So anyway, roundabout story. If you can get to Boston, you got to get there. I know that obviously that was a special year, but I've run it since 2014, and the feeling is still the same. Ever since what happened in 2013, it seems Boston is this pillar in our running community where people are proud of it, and they're proud of our ability to be able to do it, our ability to line up. The city's proud of it. It's just kind of part of being, and it goes beyond being an American, but that's a big part of it too. And that's sort of the beauty of it, is everyone's safe there, everyone's welcome there, and everyone's happy to be there.
Well, and somebody listening is going to be fired up, hearing this, because they're hearing your experience and your story before, behind how you ran it and what got you there. And they might be thinking, okay, well, where do I start? Because I didn't run anywhere near a 6-minute pace for a marathon at any point, and I don't think I'm anywhere near even being able to, qualify by accident. How does that process look for you?
Right. And I've thought a lot about this since the Boston Marathon this year was exceptionally fast. The fastest year on record. More Americans ran, sub 205 or sub 210 on the men's side than ever before, I believe. So it's crazy fast. It's getting faster and faster. And that's largely due to the state of the sport, right? Like technology's better. We've got carbon plates in our shoes, which return energy. We're able to buffer lactate with bicarb and Nomeo, both which work. They're great. So the name of the game has changed, and speed has always been relative. Time has always been relative. Place is what really dictates, quote unquote, how good someone is. It's place. But again, tying back to this, I just coached an athlete who qualified for Boston. We had these conversations. He was concerned about how fast it was. So what he essentially wanted to do was run 10 minutes under his qualifying time when he had previously missed qualifying by less than 10 seconds. So he had run under the time, but got pushed out because he wasn't far enough under. So he comes in, and we had some pretty high level conversations about our beliefs as coach and athlete, but he's thinking it's going to be this big, we're going to have to grind ourselves into the ground. We're going to have to do everything right. We're going to have to fly to an international country and get some peptides. No, say that. But really where I would start is I would abandon the block training mindset. And I know this may be controversial. Coaches may not like it. But the idea that you need a 16 or 20 week block or a 12-week block to get ready for a marathon, I think you have to move away from that at the onset. And what you need to do is you need to start running more than you're currently running for a while and get currently comfortable with whatever that volume may be. If you're a 3-day-a-week runner, make it 4 and try to do it for a month. If you're a 20-mile-a-week person, let's get to 25. Let's work in increments of 10% and try to get a little bit 10% better over time and comfortable with just doing some volume. Then when you get closer to a qualifying marathon that you're interested in, then you look at the block plan, which might be that 12-week out, that 16-week out, and you assess from there. So my starting point is simply become more active, run more if you can, walk more if you can, play pickleball more. Let's just become a stronger athlete. And then the reason I think that's such a valuable starting point is that those decisions, like good decisions compound, just like bad decisions. So a decision to become a little bit better is going to leach out into the other aspects of your life. And you're going to find that maybe more often than not, you're having one less beer when you're out with the boys, or you're going to bed 30 minutes earlier, or you're drinking an extra glass of water. And it just grows and grows and grows. And what that's essentially done is it's totally changed your floor and your foundation for what's going to come next. And that's really the biggest game changer. The young man who won Boston, I think it was Boston, or no, it was the next week in Berlin, right? Or London.
London. Yeah.
Sorry, there's a lot of marathon majors and I'm getting old. They asked him, they said, what was the key to you running? He ran under 2 hours, which is amazing. They said, what was the key? He said, mileage. It wasn't special shoes. It wasn't workouts. It wasn't all this. The guy started running more and he got better. So let's boil that down to everyone and let's do a little bit more of that at the start.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. So as you guys know, the Market Mile is a big part of the Spewak Training and Spewak Racing community. This will be our 3rd year for this race. It is on Sunday, August 9th. We are really looking forward to bringing people downtown to celebrate the amazing city of St. Louis and our 4 nonprofit partners, which are Backstoppers, Boys and Girls Club, Peter and Paul Community Services, and Great Rivers Greenway. 1 mile, Keener Plaza to the Union Station, huge party afterwards, 4 hands sponsors with beer, we'll have Caldy's Coffee, and several awesome vendors. So thanks so much for the support these last several years, and if you want to sign up, please visit marketmilestl.com. You can get registered today. Now back to the podcast. I love that because I think that there's 2 things you're talking about. There's one is fitness, and then there's mentality. And qualifying for Boston and running the Boston Marathon in our sport is pretty much for the recreational runner the highest level you can achieve, in the sense of, we're not able to run in the Olympics, unfortunately. It's the People's Championships. And I think often runners start running, and this isn't to the fault of anybody, but they get going, and they never learn how to compete. They never learn how to push themselves the way that they can be pushed, because they get into running in a fun way. That's going out, jogging with their friends, being able to talk and have conversations, and they push themselves and they get better, but they maybe don't even realize that there's that next level. It's kind of like when you work out with a trainer and in the gym. When I lift with my trainer, I have a level of confidence that I can go after because he's there to spot me. He's there to push me. And when I lift on my own, I do what I'm comfortable with. I mean, I push myself, but I don't go do the outrageous things, because part of it is the safety net. And then second of it, I just don't think that way. But when you have that person next to you that can kind of say, hey, this is what it takes, then once you, like you said, once you start getting in that mindset, it's a ripple effect. And then you're like, I'm never going back. And that's the kind of stuff that you see. So that kind of leads me to the next part of it, is that, would you say it's fair to say that, to qualify, and to train for this race, there is a level of acceptance that this is going to be a little bit different of a mindset than it is and there's nothing wrong with this, if you just want to train and run marathons and just, do this for more of the fun of it? Is it fair to say that there is just a different level of commitment level, in your opinion?
Yes and no. And I think it depends on how you define qualifying, like whether you want to qualify to just get there, also where you're coming from, in the sense, right? Like, qualifying is different for the former All-American 5K, 10K runner from Michigan, like those guys. But I do think the mindset changes in the sense that, you want to get so fit that qualifying is never a question. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do for the average person. That's hard to do for the above average person. And I think that is largely because of, and this kind of ties into what we talked about earlier, is I want people to get running more, because most people don't realize how little we're actually running. And that's why we always feel like such crap. I talked to Coach Gosson at Bradley about this, and then I was talking to Coach Noah about this recently, actually, at Carlinville. And we were talking about how when you're running a certain amount of mileage and you're lifting and you're doing core and you're doing all this stuff, if it's too low, you perpetually feel poor. You don't feel that good unless you add in some sort of stimulus that changes it up, whether that be like an intense workout or strides. Strides can be a game changer, or things like that. So it's, the mindset is you've got to commit to doing what's going to make you feel good and comfortable. And it's probably going to be more than you've ever done. And you're acknowledging that it's going to be uncomfortable to get there. So it's like this seeking of comfort, and you find it through strength, essentially, in my belief.
And I think the last thing that I would like to cover in this is that Boston, and I'm sure you agree to this, is not something where, Danny is promoting, you want to run more, you want to be more competitive, but you need to see it as a process. Like, you need to see this as something that is, it can't, these definite timelines. And we've had these athletes who, like the athlete you just talked about, and I've had an athlete who the timeline is short for them. And there's just a different level of mentality with those kind of athletes. They are ready to sacrifice their lives for that. But the reality is that you can look at this as a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year quest. And that's a piece of it. And Is that something, would you say, like, even if somebody came to you, let's just say I called you and I was like, Danny, I want to qualify for Boston. I don't care how long it takes. You're probably still going to want to teach me mentality in that first year, correct?
Yeah, we're going to teach mentality, but like that mindset is so hard to come by. And the reality is that simply by choosing to pursue this, you're going to improve, barring injury, barring other life things. And improvement's what we're really seeking. If you can get closer to the Boston qualifying, that's the real goal. And I think that mentality shift is so easy to tap into long term once you do find little bits of success. And that's really the name of the game, is let's find improvements. It's like you had mentioned on a previous podcast that you're in a 4-mile tempo that went well. And that's a moment that sticks in your mind. And ironically, a lot of the moments that stick in your minds are the moments that don't go well. But we tend to focus on those positive moments as, hey, this is working, this is progress. So you really have to frame your training in a sense to find those points of progress and positivity and then live on those. And that's why I think it's so important to simply just run for a while and run more than you've run, because it becomes normal and it becomes easy. And your level of expectation is like, well, I know that every day when I go run my first 2 miles, I don't feel very good, but I always feel better at number 4. And it just changes your perspective on how to approach it. But I would also point out another thought I had, and not to ramble on, but after you're running more, I think that most runners that are close to Boston qualifying, or runners that are trying to get faster at marathon, tend to do too much work at goal race pace. And again, this is not to undermine what any other coach is doing. But I believe that if you look at these training plans, and if you and I go to Grok and plug one in, you'll see a ton of goal race pace work. Whereas I think when we approach this with a longer spectrum of time, what we can do is I can say, all right, Mark, today you are this marathoner. So this is your fitness today. So we are going to train at this fitness. And then in a week, when you're a little bit faster, we're going to train at this fitness, and we're going to work towards our goal pace and build this plan. And what that does is it creates continuity. It reduces injury risk. It makes it all a lot easier to manage. It's never easy, but nothing worth it is, right? So I think you have to train faster than race pace, much slower than race pace for long durations, like long tempos and things like that. And you hit race pace, goal race pace, more often as you get closer. But I think we have a tendency as coaches and as athletes, more so athletes think, if I want to run, say I want to run 8-minute pace for the marathon, I bet if I go out today and I run 2 hours at 8-minute pace, I know I can do it. And it's like, that thought process doesn't really make sense to me long term.
Yeah, and I think that's so important for you to share, because you're not going to go into the gym and be able to max out in the bench press if you have never lifted before. Right. And it's the same kind of thing, is that it does not mean that you can't get to that goal of benching maybe 150 pounds or 200 pounds. It just means that you got to work towards that. And so if you have this goal of Boston and you want to be a better runner, don't let this discourage you. Don't let those beginning steps. And Danny talked about this in our previous episode, and I think this will be fun for you to continue to share, is that you got to share the moments of just progress is progress and happiness in the sport year round. Like you were talking about being a masters runner and dealing with injuries and how your expectations are so differently. That mindset has to be always, because if all you do is get up every day and think I'm a failure because I'm not at Boston Marathon qualifying pace right now, you're not going to enjoy what you're doing. And second, you might be holding yourself back from what your potential is because you're so down on yourself all the time, and it's not allowing you to really run free. Where, like you said, the patience and the big piece, if you could just commit to the process and what your coach is saying and follow this training, it's going to get you there. And any athlete I've ever worked with, I know it's the same for you, is that we've started off, at a point where, it might be 2 years out, they're running their half marathon at the time they want to, pace-wise, that they want to run at a full at some point, and they get there. But the distinct difference between those athletes that stick it out and the ones that don't are the ones that, truly love the success they're having, the progress, and they let that goal be something as an inspiration, something to shoot for, not as this end all be all, kind of I'm a failure if I'm not going to accomplish it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really the key point. And I know Nick Saban has talked a lot about this, but it's about the process. If you're focused so much on the outcomes, it undermines your ability to do what you got to do day to day. And I think, again, this is not to take shots at any coaches in the world, but I think workouts that indicator workouts, like, hey, if you go run this, you can race this. I don't prefer to do that, because I think that limits on both sides for an athlete. If I have a bad day and I don't hit my indicator times, well, I can't do what I'm trying to do. It's not working. Or if I do it, well, this workout says that I can run this pace. That's my cap. And I don't really believe that. So I prefer to, I've worked with a lot of type A athletes over the years, and it's still funny because I like a lot of fartleks, which are effort-based workouts where you're running for fixed durations or variable durations with fixed and variable rest. And the type A athletes always respond the same. All right, well, how fast on the ons? It's up to you, buddy. What do you mean, coach? Like, I want you to feel it out. Like, your body's going to adapt better. And that's a great way to kind of pull back in training and reframe what we need to do. But it teaches you to feel it out. It teaches you to get comfortable with yourself. And you essentially, the biggest part of training for any sort of marathon, in my opinion, is the ability to know that just because I feel one way now doesn't mean I'm going to feel that way in 5 minutes, 1 minute, or 30 minutes. And you have to be willing to kind of experience those ebbs and flows, both emotionally, physically, whatever other ways we feel are. And I think that's a big part of really doing things the right way. I know I got off on a tangent there, but yeah.
No, I love it. And I think this is, we could have multiple conversations about Boston and, what we can do, down the road. And I think Danny will be inspired to do this is when we get closer to Boston, or, that time period where people are thinking about it. Maybe that's in September when the qualifying times are kind of being set, the deadline per se. And then, the next winter, we can talk a little bit more in depth about how we got there, and how you go through this process. And Danny, I'm sure, has many clients and athletes and friends in the industry that can share on these things. But I think it's a good topic right now. Boston's always relevant, and it's a great one right now because this is going to be obviously released in the summer months. And if you're thinking about getting better, there's no better time than now to motivate yourself. Obviously, it's hot to train in for a lot of places, but it's a lot easier to get out the door and start a good habit and good routine now in comparison to the middle of winter, and you want that momentum. So this was a great conversation. Thank you so much, Danny. We're looking forward to more episodes with you on the Steady State podcast segment of the Spewak Training Podcast. That's a lot of podcast words right there, but these are the kind of conversations you guys can look forward to. And what we love is if you are willing to, shoot us a message about the episodes and questions that you have, and whether that's contacting Danny. He has his opportunity to follow him on Instagram, which we'll have here in the bio here, as well as you can contact him through our website, Danny@spewaktraining.com. Danny's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to these kind of things, and we would love to kind of hear what your feedback is so that we can put that out there, and maybe that'll kind of rechange some of the episodes and things that we have coming up here. So as always, if you're interested in learning more about Spewak Training, we'd love to set up a free consultation call with you. Feel free to contact us at contact@spewaktraining.com, and we would be very grateful if you'd be willing to leave us a review and on our podcast, and help share the messages that we're getting across there. This is something that Danny and I are both very passionate about, and we have a lot of stories, whether that's through the athlete coach interviews that we're doing or it's with the Steady State segments. I think there's a lot of things that you can be inspired by. So thanks so much, and we look forward to next time with Danny Stults.